Good afternoon, and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Passover edition number 2.
Here we go. Yep.
So, it was getting late last night, and I had not heard back from the Rabbi about today's episode. And I, of course, was ready to begin my extensive 3-minute research and show prep. So I figured there was only 2 holidays coming up this week. I have Easter and Passover. So I made a giant leap. And I guessed today's episode would be about Passover.
Yeah.
I did that on my own without any help. So with that in mind, I came up with some very deep and random Pesach thoughts and questions that you should bring up at whoever Seder you're attending this year. Okay, so I think it'll be good to bring it up anywhere you are. These are generic for any Seder. And here are my thoughts.
Okay.
Number 1, my friend Irving's wife was so dumb.
How dumb was she?
Okay. Gotta get that. And after Seder, she asked her husband why everyone kept putting down his Uncle Herb. He really didn't seem that bitter.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. At the last Seder I attended, my friend's blind Lebanese uncle was passed a piece of matzah, and after 5 minutes of feeling it, he shouted, "Who wrote this crap?" Okay, if your alcoholic cousin mixed the horosis with the chopped liver, could it accelerate his horosis of the liver? Okay. And finally, if your husband is getting too much pleasure from the bread of affliction, could he be a masochist? Well, or you can say none of these things and be invited back again next year. That said, maybe the rabbi has something important to say about Passover.
Jeez.
I did my best with the limited time and skill that I was given. That's all I got.
Let's maybe I'll give a shot at trying to salvage this thing.
Yeah, please do if you could. It was late night.
The train wreck that is Pesach. Okay.
Yes.
So let's try to put this together. Now, you would think Passover, you'd open up the story, you read about the Exodus and everything like that. You would think that it would be found in the story of the Exodus of Egypt.
Right.
But I will tell you what the key line is. The key line to understanding the entire Exodus from Egypt is not found in the story of the Exodus from Egypt.
Wow.
The key line is found in the 10 Commandments.
Okay.
You think that maybe that would be a Shavuos show.
It's a different holiday.
No. Let's go to the 10 Commandments. You all remember the 10 Commandments. The first commandment, some of you have read the book and others have seen the movie, but one way or another, everyone knows that great line, "I am the Lord your God," right? That's the first line comes booming out there to, depending on your age, Charlton Heston, or if it's
they got some newer versions there with some generic looking characters.
Right. Or the, Prince of Egypt, and, I think
right.
Yeah. Anyway, so that line is true, but not the whole truth, right? Which, by the way, is kind of interesting. People talk a lot about fake news.
Right.
Fake news isn't really the problem because it's always discoverable and disputable. What's really the problem is partial news.
I agree.
Partial news is really dangerous.
So we need to know the rest of the story.
That's right.
Yes.
And therefore, let's start off with a quote. "I am the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt." Okay. So now let's say you've got God, and he wants to introduce you. You get in the elevator, and you're there, and like, "Who are you?" "I'm God." And he pulls out his card, and you look at the card and say, "Wow, it says God on there." And when you look down at his address, his phone number, and it says 1. His number is 1.
He's the first
He's
guy.
number 1. Just dial 1.
Yep, you got
it. Enter 1. He's 1. Okay, so his name is God. Underneath it, there's always a little tagline.
Right.
So, whatever it might be, such and such, Rabbi Binyamin Friedman. And then underneath it'll say Congregation Ariel or something like that, right? So what does it say on God's tagline? It says God. What does it say underneath?
I guess it took you out of the land of Egypt. Is that where we're going?
Well, that's what it says.
Right.
But let's say you were his printer. Right. And he called up and he said, God, make some cars, make me cars for God. You say, well, God, what do you want it to say underneath? What's your tagline? And then what would you suggest to God it should say?
The man, the king, the boss.
Number one,
Number one.
all powerful.
Yeah, that's where I'd go.
I made this card and I made you too.
Right.
I made everything. I am.
Right.
How about the creators of the heavens and the earth?
That would be a big one.
You know, maybe even, you know, the one that rested on Saturday after doing everything. And I don't know. But you would think he would talk about being all powerful.
That would be if I was his marketing guy or his printer, I would suggest that.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Creator.
Yep.
The big creator. Instead, he says, I am Lord your God who took you out of
Yeah,
Egypt.
that's just, it doesn't seem that's not a good tagline, but okay.
So it seems as though, and there's actually 3 other places in the Torah where God is telling us something, and then he says, I am the Lord your God, that's why I can tell you this, but he says, who took you out of the land of Egypt? And it's a total non sequitur. In this one, maybe you could say, well, these people had just been taken out of Egypt, so that's how he introduced himself.
Right.
Even then, I'm a little skeptical, but in the other places in the Torah that it says it, there's really no reason to talk about the exodus of Egypt. And yet, God introduced himself as the one who took him out of Egypt. So therefore, what God's trying to tell us is that it's about the exodus from Egypt. What you need to know, everything that you need to know about me, says God, about you, about life, about the world, it's all there in the story of the Exodus of Egypt.
So the Genesis, all the other books, everything else, I mean, well, Genesis up to there, it's all really was leading up to Egypt, and that's what it's all about.
Right. And in the famous words of the Sefer Kuzari, which we have mentioned before, God says, how do you know that I created the world? I mean, I did create the world, but no one ever saw it.
Right.
But you did see me mess with Egypt. And after you saw me mess with Egypt, you should become totally convinced that I am the one who could create the world.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
only I, because I did all kinds of things like, you know, in the hail balls.
Right.
The hail balls came down. Well, the Midrash says they had fire inside of them.
Right.
So a lot of these plagues got things not only to do something unusual, but even to do things that were contradictory to themselves.
Right.
So therefore, it's very powerful. But there's one particular message that we want to get out of this, and that is, one of the rabbis, maybe 1,000 years ago, asked the following question. So God says, I am Lord your God. Now we believe that there are 10 commandments. 10 statements anyway, and that this is a commandment. So you're supposed to believe that there is God. Okay, I got that. What are we supposed to believe? That he took us out of Egypt? You're supposed to believe that? Like, what does that mean? Now, if you want to believe that he is God, that's relevant because when we walk out of here, we got to remember that he's God, and therefore the way I talk to you and the way I act, and all, that's relevant. But what is remembering or knowing that he took us out of Egypt have to do with anything? Vis-a-vis a commandment, I mean, it's an interesting piece of information.
Right.
But what does it mean actively for us? So, he says, this idea that I took you out of Egypt, he says, that's my M.O. You know who I am? I'm God. I'm God the Savior. I'm God the Redeemer. And that's what I do. I take people out.
Take people out.
I take people out. Where you're somewhere bad, I can get you out of there. I can get you to another place, a better place. Let's call that the promised land.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
I take people out and I take them to the promised land. That's what I do. That's my thing.
That's a good tagline now. I'm starting to like this now. Yeah,
That's a
it's not
tagline.
bad.
I mean, you know, it's true that I did create everyone,
Right.
but vis-a-vis you, that's not as important
Right.
as the fact that if you're in a bad place right now,
I can get you
I
over here
take
to the
you
promised
out.
land. Wow.
I take you out.
Yeah.
And how do you know that? I took them out of Egypt. And if I can take you out of Egypt, and given all the circumstances and all of the stuff that required, and the way that I did it, I wanted everyone to be absolutely sure that if I could get them out of Egypt, I can pretty much get anybody out of anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because, you know, what does it take? If it takes me turning like all the water into blood, I can do that. You know, if it takes me like having everyone covered with frogs and
Rice,
boils
yeah.
and on and on and on and on. If it takes me like turning off all light, I can do that. Light, what's the big deal? Poof, no light. If it takes me killing all the firstborn, if you can go figure that one out, I can do that too. So I can get anybody out of anywhere. And you know what? That's what I do, and that's what I'm going to do.
See, that's different because a lot of people aren't looking at it that way. It's a story of Egypt and whatever. And most people aren't looking at, what about me today? Well,
Yeah,
you need to get me out of the problems I'm in right now.
That was there.
Fix this.
They were going to kill us. We got freed. Let's eat. The whole thing, right?
Right.
But no. You got to believe that this is an ongoing process. This exodus from Egypt, that was my introduction to you. But it continues. And it continues until everybody is free and everybody has been redeemed. And just like God said, he's got a plan here. Just like when he went to Moses, is told, go to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh. This is also another one of those half quotes, half news.
Right.
Okay, what did God say what did Moses say when he shows up to Pharaoh? He tells Pharaoh,
let my people go.
Right.
Well, he said it kind of with a lisp a little bit, but he didn't say it as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
But you got the deep voice. That's the main thing.
I tried.
Yeah. The problem is, that's another half quote.
Right.
The whole quote is, let my people go that they may serve me.
Right.
God didn't just want people to be free.
True.
Because what do you do being free? Free to what? Run around naked and go clubbing people or something?
Right.
I mean, like free to create mayhem? No. We don't want people to be free. God wanted them to be free. Instead of serving Pharaoh, he wanted them to serve him. So what is God's plan? God's working on a plan to free the world to serve him. And at that point, the world is going to be redeemed from all of their various servitudes. And servitudes we have plenty of. And we're going to be free to serve God. And it's going to be a beautiful thing.
Well, now you're talking about the ultimate redemption.
Yes.
But does this have something to do with my daily life right now? Like,
Yeah.
maybe I'm a drinker, maybe I have other issues. Can God and will God redeem me for those issues?
Yeah, let's picture slaves. You have slaves, even more recently in American history. You had people that were slaves. Black people were enslaved in America. They aspired to be free.
Mm-hmm.
How did they aspire to be free? Because they had read in this book, they heard the very popular story that a Savior came in the name of Moses, and he led them free to the Promised Land. And they said, well, if Moses could lead the Israelites to the Promised Land, we can also be free. In other words, you live differently if you expect to someday be free. If you don't believe that you will ever be free, you live differently. You throw in the towel.
Well, that's true, and a lot of people have. So, but still, is there an intermediate freedom, or is it just the ultimate redemption? Does this the way I should act in my daily life to get rid of my problems? Maybe I got to look to God, maybe I got to do whatever, and then I'll get that intermediate freedom.
So, if you do believe that you are free and you want to serve God, then you have automatically become free from your various problems. This is why Moses shows up to Pharaoh and he says, let them travel 3 days out in the desert and they're going to worship me and then they'll come back. So, okay, you might say Pharaoh would say, well, I don't want to risk it. You might not come back. On the other hand, where are they going to go? They're going out into the desert. They're just going to die out there. So Pharaoh could have, especially after the first few plagues, he could have said, okay, go worship, but be back in 3 days. Could have said that. He didn't want to say that. Why? Because Pharaoh wanted them to serve him.
Right.
He didn't want them to be serving anyone else.
So there's no way Pharaoh ever could have agreed to that.
That's right. Which tells you that when you are serving God, you are automatically free from Pharaoh. Even though Pharaoh might think he's still got you in service, no. If you are free in your mind to serve God, you are free. And I would tend to say that This has been displayed so many times. I think it's the underpinning of the all 12-step programs.
No, I think so.
You turn it over to a higher authority,
higher power.
and then you find you're able to unload your addiction, and you find your serenity.
And it seems like that works not just for an addiction, for any issues, any problems, any situations you have in your life.
Right.
You got to turn away from Pharaoh, and you got to know that an ultimate power is taking care of you.
That's right. So God is the Redeemer, the Freer, the Savior. That's what He does. That's His tagline.
Wow.
And that's how you and I can use Him. And ultimately, really important to know, everyone should live life knowing that the world is ultimately going to be redeemed. It's not just the Jews. He started with the Jews.
Right.
He started with the Israelites to show the world. He always uses the Israelites to show His message, to communicate His message to the world. He freed the Israelites because He wants to free the world, the entire world, humankind, Chinese, Africans, Igbo tribesmen, you name it. Everybody is going to be freed. Everybody is going to be redeemed. The Jews are the ones that show that it can happen, and we believe it will happen. So Passover, as a holiday, is really significant, not just for the Jews. It's actually significant for the entire world.
Right.
It's really important.
So as Jews, we could have on our card, been redeemed.
Yeah.
I mean, just to let everybody know that we have been, at least once, we've been redeemed. I can put that on my card.
Right. So actually, we would put on our name, and it's an exclusive sales rep for God.
Right.
So we're the reps.
Redeemer. We're pushing the Redeemer.
Right. We are reps for Redeemer Inc. Right. Which is the greatest redemption company, specializing in redemptions of all kinds, natures, and sources. Yeah?
Wow.
You got it. We can redeem it.
I can sell that. I can sell that.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
That's right. So Passover is a universal holiday in a certain way. The Jews celebrated because God chose them as the symbol of that redemption. But it is very universal, but it's not about freedom. It is really about something more. That's why I use the word redemption. It's freedom to worship God, which is itself a redemption, because that means freedom from worshiping other things.
Right. Getting freedom is just one small step, and that's not even the most important one, because freedom to go to here doesn't do you any good. Freedom to go to here into worshiping God, that's the ultimate freedom.
Right. Otherwise, what would you want to be free for? Let's say you're free. So now what? Now you're free. I'm free. I can do anything I want. Well, what would you do? And that's really a bad thing, too, because if people are free and they got nothing to do and they don't know what they want to do,
that's a dangerous situation.
then actually, you know what they'll want to do? They'll want to addict themselves to something.
Like a golden calf or something like that.
Or you'll find something that you have to worship. Like, actually, the truth is, this is why people addict themselves to sports teams. Because other than certain people that I know whose teams have a tendency to win a lot, right? But most people's teams lose almost all the time. Almost all the time.
That is
ultimately, true. Right? Pick a team, any team, the odds are overwhelming. You're going to be losing most of the time.
There's only one team.
And if you get to the big game, then then you're very lucky. That's unusual, and then probably then you will lose too, because the odds are you're going to lose.
Right.
So therefore, what have you done? It's sort of a misery addiction.
Set yourself up with shit.
It is a misery addiction. But you keep coming back because you keep hoping. So it's a great thing. It's a way to spend your entire life hoping that someday your team will win.
Well, I can identify with it, but of course I'm identifying with people who are going to lose, which is not a good thing, which isn't fun.
Right.
Yeah, so wow, that's what Moses was thinking.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, but he picked the right team there, so it's not bad.
Right.
Interesting stuff. So all of us, when we go to our Seders and we're thinking about, we're just honoring this thing in history, we're talking about, hey, as we escaped Egypt, we're really actually thinking about the future. We should be really thinking about the future.
We are thinking forward, and that's why it's important. That's why I want to study the story and get to know it, because it's happening. It's an ongoing story. It's ongoing in my life personally. It's ongoing in the world.
Wow.
That's why we spend the time focusing on it and knowing it, because we believe it's going to keep going, this redemption. We got out of Egypt, and we're going to keep redeeming right to the very end.
Right to the end. Wow. All right. If I had to vote You might have said something. The audience and fans might feel differently. I think yours might have been a little bit more intense and maybe help us a little more than the stuff I came up with.
Intense.
Intense.
That's where they lived in the desert.
In the desert.
Very good.
Okay, so the rabbi's funny too. Yeah, see, you got that. Interesting stuff. Wow.
Okay.
Okay. I think this should help you all through Passover and give you a whole new perspective on the thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody have a great Pesach.
Happy Passover.
We'll see you after that.